everybody. I'm April, and this is Cass, and we're here with week number 3, chapter number 3 of our book, What Happens When Women Say Yes to God. And so today's chapter is called When Obedience Becomes Radical. And last week we talked a little bit about the definition of radical obedience and said that it was really biblical obedience. It really, by worldly standards, the world might call it radical, but really it's what is in the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. So, what do you think about this chapter, Cass?
I really liked this one. I think this one had a lot to it and a lot of stuff that kind of made you, stop and reassess.
Make you go,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made you think about, what you're doing that maybe you could do differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we ended last week's, we talked about the 5 questions. Mm-hmm. And so this one kind of picked up a little bit to me with the same kind of thing as far as knowing what God's leading you to do. And she starts out telling us that she got told by God or had the feeling or inclination that she's supposed to sell her house.
Yeah.
So she knew that. Well, at first she thought, like, one of the is that really God? Mm-hmm. Didn't she? And then it's funny how, like, we talked about how God will confirm things over and over. And then she went on to talk about how then her husband, just out of the blue, like she had not mentioned it to him, and out of the blue, he said, I think we need to sell our house. And because she'd been worried about telling him or asking him or bringing up the subject at all with him. Yeah, so I thought, that's pretty cool that, again, with the 5 questions, there was the confirmation. Yeah. Because if we remember, number 3 is what I'm hearing being confirmed through other messages. Yeah. So she got that way. Mm-hmm. So what did you think about that whole section about...
I really liked it. I think she had mentioned that in her other book that I've read by her, because when I started reading it, I was like, I think her husband is going to say that they need to sell the house too.
So you already
and then I got to that, and I was like, oh yeah, I must have read that somewhere by her. But I liked when she talked about, I doubted my ability to really know if God was speaking to me. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we get stuck in that, and we're worried that He's not calling us to do that, so then we just don't do anything. Yeah. And I think it's easy to kind of get stuck in that.
It's easy to talk ourselves out of.
Like, oh, well, He doesn't, that's not really what, and it's easy to back all the way out instead of, really digging in and, seeking and searching and seeing if it is His will. Sometimes we're like, well, I don't know for sure, so I'm just not going to do it.
And then I think when we take that attitude, then when we get confirmations, we discount them. Yeah. We think that's just me. Mm-hmm. That's just me.
Yeah, I'm just looking for it now.
Yeah, Or some of the other things, we don't ask the question, is what I'm hearing pleasing to God? We don't ever get that far. Mm-hmm. Like we don't like it. We don't really like. Mm-hmm. So we talk ourselves out of it. Yeah. And so what she said there, I liked on the top of page 44, I didn't doubt God. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we sometimes as we read, especially the Old Testament, when we see God talking to people, we think, man, if God would just speak to me like that, I wouldn't have to be second guessing,
But God spoke to them like that, and they still
yeah, so it didn't help, did it? They argued even then. So
that's been my main takeaway of reading the Old Testament recently, is I feel like we always say that. Like, if God would just speak out loud to me, well, God's speaking out loud to Moses all the time, and Moses still like, we sure about that?
Yeah, or I can't.
So I think sometimes that's like nice reassurance of like, okay, well, Moses still couldn't get it.
In hindsight, if the tables were turned here, those Old Testament people would go, well, if I'd had Jesus, if I knew the story of Jesus, then I would have this would have been easier for me. So, we can yay about them, but they could yay about us, couldn't they? So the bottom line is, we all can make excuses if we want to find something to, make an excuse about. Yeah. Down at the bottom of 44, I like where she says, well, I'm gonna have to step on Cassie's toes right here, because when I read this about her giving up TV, it made me laugh because Cass loves TV.
Personally attacked.
And I was thinking, when Cass reads this, she gonna feel personally
I've been
attacked.
personally victimized by Lisa Turkiston in this chapter.
But I like that she said that God had been kind of prompting her to leave that off, and she said, it wasn't that what she was watching was bad per se, but she says, I was filling myself with the world's perspective and influences while he wanted to be my strength and fill me with himself. And I think, how many times do we fill our lives with, not necessarily TV, but just the world. We fill ourselves with the world, and then we fill ourselves as full as we can get, and we leave very little room for godly influence or, God's Spirit to work in us.
Yeah.
So, what did you think
well,
about the TV?
Anybody who knows me well knows that I have a deep love and obsession with TV. And I have been known to fill every waking moment of...
She don't like quiet.
No, I hate quiet. Like, I can't even walk from like one end to the house to the other without like something playing.
There was something we were doing in here the other day, and you were walking down the hall, and your daddy said, "Is she watching something that walking down the hall?"
Yeah, like I went to go do laundry, and I took
we were in the door cleaning the campground.
We were cleaning over the campground, he said.
I like can't walk from like here to back there without some form of noise, and it's usually Netflix or something. And so I think, this was kind of an eye-opener for me, because I think sometimes I'm like, well, what I'm watching isn't bad, but I think when we're filling every moment with something else.
With something. It don't matter what.
There's no room for God to work or to talk to you or speak to you when there's that much.
Because you have yourself so focused on other things.
Yeah.
And TV is a thing that's, internet is something that takes our focus a lot of times. Those two things are probably some of the worst as far as easy to get trapped into.
Yeah, and so I've honestly been thinking about how to cut back from all of my technology for a while, and I think I'm going to do something for Lent.
Yeah,
but I'm not quite sure what yet. But Lent starts tomorrow, so I'll update y'all next week on.
And I saw Miss Marge made a post about that. We and I agree. We all should really think about giving up something for Lent. Yeah, it's 40 days, and it starts tomorrow. So if you haven't come up with something to give up, you got a little time till tomorrow. Or take on something. Just do something, that you can, every time you either do it or don't do it, that you can think and pray and think about what God has done for you, and spend time either reading the Bible, praying, those kind of things to draw closer to God, rather than have that occupy your time. Yeah. If you give up food, the premise of that is, if you give up food while you're normally eating, you would be reading your Bible or praying. Yeah. So whatever it is that you do.
I think sometimes it's easy to think of like, oh, this can be a diet. Like, I'm going to give this up. And then we kind of lose the meaning of it, because we're like, oh, well, I'm giving this up. But we don't really think about like why we're giving it up, or what we should take on in place of that. And like, I'll call her about right here. He gave up Reese's one year, Reese's Cups, and took on Snickers. And I'm like, that ain't, you ain't doing nothing. Because the point is, if you're going to leave off the Reese's Cups, then you should be praying, reading your Bible during the time you'd normally be. Yeah. Although I can pray and eat at the same, I can read my Bible and eat at the same time, can't y'all? But, think about what it frees you up to do, not just what you're giving up or taking on. And last year we did the little book. We did the little Lent book, and I saw Cass had gotten herself a Lent book, came in the mail today. I'm excited about that.
So, if it turns, you might want to post some of those. You want to post some of those online. Yeah. Some people might want to share in with that.
I'll read a few days of it and then see.
Start posting them. In addition to our 3-day a week. Yeah. So, all right. So back to this, but Lent does start tomorrow on Ash Wednesday. So if anybody's thinking about that, okay.
I liked where she talked about she prayed that her desire to please him would be stronger than her desire for television. And I think that can, you can replace desire for television with whatever.
Desire for.
Yeah, whatever might be something that you go to and
Right.
you fill your time with.
Right.
But I think, that's a great thing
Yeah,
to pray.
and we need to examine ourselves here. And I think Lent is a
Find
time of
whatever
that.
it is that's your thing.
Because, mine is definitely not television. Yours is television, there's no doubt. I don't know exactly what mine is, but I need to figure that out.
Yeah.
And, each one of us have our own thing.
And it might be different things for different people, at different times. Like one day it might be this for you. For me, it's always TV. That's always. I have a problem and it's been there for a while.
Yeah, and she said, God may not ask you to turn off the TV. He may ask you to do something else. The point here is that there may come a time at some point in your life when you will need to decide between your will and His. And I think that's the thing right there. We have the ability to choose.
Yeah.
And so it's our will or it's His will. And there's going to be times when we're going to have to choose. So, did you have something?
I really liked when she said, we need not fear what our obedience will cause to happen in our life. We should only fear what our disobedience will cause us to miss.
Yeah, and she repeats that again back in the back on the questions
Yeah.
too. So that is a very important point right there. What you're going to miss is not going to be no big deal. But what you're going to miss by disobedience is going to be a really big deal. So, don't fear, like, what's that thing y'all say? Fear of missing out? What is that? FOMO? For people my age, that means...
Fear of missing out.
Okay. She said that to me a few times. I don't know what that even is. But fear of missing out, we don't need to have that about what we're going to miss by obeying God. Because sometimes we do, don't we? And somewhere, we may not be to it. Oh, it's down here at the bottom. She says we long for a cost analysis where we weigh out what we'd be giving up against what we'd be gaining and then decide if the trade is worth it.
Yeah.
So we tend to do that. We tend to put our will and what we want beside what we think God wants us to do, and we don't just pick God. We look at him in the balance and go, and to me that kind of leads into what we're talking about next here, the half-heartedness. And that's what you're doing when you weigh out God's will against my will. God's will should always win.
Yeah.
But it sometimes don't. Most of the time don't, to be honest. She said, this is how I felt about God's request to sell our home. She kept thinking, my home is precious to me. Not for its financial wealth, but for the wealth of memories we've made there. And why would God ask me to let this go? But then, we go right on into her talking about, I don't know if that's right close to here, but talking about, I'm skipping ahead, but talking about Abraham. And my goodness, he was asked to give something way more precious than his home, wasn't he? But the bottom line there tends to be the willingness. Are you willing to let that go? Whatever it is, are you willing?
Because as she goes on in the story, they didn't end up selling it.
Right.
But it was that willingness to do it and to put it up for sale and to, go through the process of it. And then God kind of,
And I love the part about holding on too tight to stuff, because that has happened to me so many times. And I've come to, and this is April's opinion here, so take it or don't take it. But to me, anything you got to hold on to real tight ain't worth keeping.
Yeah.
Because you ain't got to hold, if it's something that's meant for you.
To be there.
Yeah. And if it's a person that loves you, they're gonna you don't have to hold on to it. I know there's that saying: if you love something, set it free. If it
comes
back,
it's meant to be.
And if it ain't, it never was. Something like that. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But anyway, that really is true, isn't it? And sometimes I've had to learn that the hard way. I'm holding on so tight to something, I don't want to let go. I don't want, even though it's being snatched away.
It's hard.
And sometimes I don't know why I hold on so tight. Why do I even want that so bad? But sometimes we get
in the moment. It's hard.
We get really what's the word? Like just
Fixated on something.
yes, fixated on something, you know, and we just want to hold on to it so tight. But, you know, I like the picture that she created for me in my mind, that if you have your hands held out, letting go, or you can let
It's
go
in your hands.
and God can take it if He wants. It's in your hands. He can take it if He wants. But with your hands held out like that, you can also receive more. If you're over there doing like this right here, I'm holding on to what I got. Ain't nobody getting these ink pens. These are mine. Well, okay, these are mine, but I can't take nothing else either, can I? If my hands are so full of other things, then I can't receive the blessings that God's wanting to put into my hands.
Yeah.
And that's a
that
double win, isn't it? Win-win. Let God, you know, God gave it all to us anyway. Whatever you got in your hand, God gave it to you, didn't He? So if He don't want you to have it, then it, you know, let Him have it back. You know, and then He can give you what He really wants you to have. And I think that kind of boils back to the whole trust God issue. If we trust God enough to realize He is for us and not against us, then we will be more willing to say, yes, God, take whatever I've got and give me what you want me to have, because I know what you want me to have is better anyway. You know, but that all boils back to trust.
Yeah.
Trust and belief that God is really for us. So I got a little ahead there of the book, but anyway, okay, you got anything to add on that part?
No, I like, this is where she gets into talking about her husband.
Oh, about the dead fish.
Yeah.
You got to talk about the dead fish.
Yeah, they, her husband says, I think we should sell the house. So they call the realtor, they put it up on the market, and then they meet with the real estate agent, and Art, her husband, is just going on and on about this pond that he's made that has bass in it.
It's perfect pond.
Yes, this perfect fishing pond with all of these bass, and they're kind of, you know, they put it on the market, but then they also...
In obedience.
Yes. But then they also say to each other, like, we're not too aggressive in trying to sell it.
And didn't they kind of
And
say that
they
to
told the
real estate?
they
the
told
realtor,
the realtor they didn't really want to aggressively try to sell it. And then they leave the meeting and they head home, and when they get home, there are 82 dead fish in the lake.
Floating on top.
Yeah. And that was just kind of like...
And then tell about what her husband
her
did.
husband got out and was crying and knelt down beside the pond and asked for God's forgiveness. And she says God had made His request clear, and we had given Him a half-hearted response.
Yes.
So I think sometimes...
And how often do we do that?
And I think, you know, like they said yes, they did the initial thing, that sometimes the hardest step is that initial yes. But then they kind of were half-hearted after that initial response. And I think sometimes we do that and we say, well, we said yes, we were doing it, but...
We try to rationalize our half-heartedness.
We weren't doing it to the extent or in the way that we should have been.
Right. We wasn't really doing it because we had aligned our will with God. We were doing it because we were trying to appear
like,
obedient.
check it off the list.
And appear that we're... But really, our will is still our own.
Yeah.
Because we're saying, well, let's don't really say, don't work too hard to sell this house because we don't really want to. We love that pond.
Yeah.
But then God gave them a visual. I like that visual that God gave them. This guy had created the perfect bass pond, so there was no reason why there'd be dead fish, except that God was showing them, look, I see that you're being half-hearted. Well, so this got me to thinking. So what's that make you think of when you say the word half-hearted?
Lukewarm.
Lukewarm. That's what I thought of. And I didn't see where she had even said that, but it kind of planted that seed, and I'm like, lukewarm, that's what I'm thinking. So then I went and did a little research, because, you know, in the book of Revelation, in Revelation 3:11 through 22, he talks about the angel, the Lord that's speaking in the book of Revelation, speaking about the churches.
7 churches.
The 7 churches, is speaking to the church at Laodicea in this chapter. And what he says to them is, I know the things you do that are neither hot nor cold. I wish you were one or the other, but since you are lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth. And one of the translations I read said, vomit you out of my mouth. So like this is awful. You know, this is something awful. Well, I got to thinking about that and thinking, okay, that to me, half-hearted is lukewarm. But then when you read that, you kind of think, what is that? Like, we get the connotation of hot. Like, we understand being spiritually hot, right? Because that means like we're good, we're going after it, we're energetic, enthusiastic. But listen to what it says. I know the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish you were one or the other. And it almost sounds like, wait a minute, what is he saying? I wish you were hot. I understand that, but also or cold. And to me, I was like, wait, that don't seem right, you know? Because cold to me would almost seem like being an atheist.
That's
or being,
what I always
like
thought.
turned completely like 180 degrees away
like
from
you
God.
were bad and people knew you were bad.
And
like
the angel or the Spirit of the Lord is saying, I'd rather you be that than lukewarm. Okay, but I did some research, so this is a little sidetrack, but I think y'all gonna like this. Okay, so if you've read that before, the I don't know what to call it, the criticism of the church at Laodicea, they were being criticized for being lukewarm. And when we read that in today's context, we would say what I just said, like, what do you mean you'd rather for us to not believe at all than to be lukewarm? But in the context that they said I thought this was just the most interesting thing. Okay, so there was two other places in the vicinity, in the geographical vicinity of Laodicea. One of them was called Hierapolis. Okay, Hierapolis was known for the hot mineral springs that they had of water. So they had all these therapeutic people come there for medicinal reasons to get the therapy of sitting in the hot springs. Okay, on the other surrounding area, there was the church at Colossae, which is also one of the churches, or Colossians is later, not one of the churches in Revelation. Okay, but one of the churches that Paul wrote to. So the church at Colossae was known for, get this now, because we're looking at the hot and cold connotation. They were known for having very cold well springs water that came from the mountains. And it was known for being very refreshing and invigorating. So instead of cold saying, oh, that's a terrible thing, cold is a good thing. Because cold is we don't want to drink a lukewarm bottle of water, do we? We'd rather get one out of the refrigerator that's cold and refreshing, right? So the people at Laodicea would have understood this, because they, at Laodicea, was known for having lukewarm, tepid water. And nobody wanted to drink the water when they went to Laodicea. They'd rather go over there and either to the Hierapolis and lay in the hot springs, or go over to Colossae and drink the ice cold water. So to me, that was interesting. That, so the next time you're reading that and you think, well, is it really better to be cold than lukewarm? That's not what that means.
Yeah.
What it means is the hot, was great. It was therapeutic, medicinal, helpful. The cold was refreshing, invigorating, and this, is our spiritual. We need to be that. We need to be extreme. We don't need to be, and sometimes I think the lukewarm, we might say, well, what do you mean by lukewarm? That means we're a little bit doing the right thing, right? We're talking about on a spiritual level. But I read some different commentators who said lukewarm really just means going through the motions spiritually, which is kind of what we're talking about here, being half-hearted, being unaware of our spiritual poverty, being average, not living fervently for God, not serving Him with energy and enthusiasm. And so, God wants us to be extreme for Him, which is really, like we talked about, radical obedience. It's really not. It's really just biblical. He wants us to be biblically serving Him, There's a reason why the first commandment says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. God wants our attention. But He also gave us the free will, so we got to choose that. So anyway, I thought the whole hot and cold thing was really interesting. I hope that you guys like that as much as I did. And if you want to go and read that, it's from Revelation 3, verses 11 through 22. Read that, and now knowing what you know about the Laodiceans, know that they got that. Yeah. They got that criticism. Yeah. of not being lukewarm, because they lived there in a place where their water was lukewarm and nasty and dirty, and nobody really wanted to drink it. So they got that. So another example of how context is very important when you're reading. Yeah. Okay, so jump in now and go back. Let's go back to Lisa now after we took that little sidetrack.
This is where she starts talking about a whole and purified heart. And she says, God is not interested in half our heart. He wants it all. He wants to remove the things that stand in the way of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the things she kind of talked about that stood in her way. And I think we all, have to look at ourselves to see what that is.
What stands in the way? What? Yeah. What? And know that God wants us to be rid of those things.
Yeah.
Anything that comes between you and God is basically, and I learned this the hard way too, but basically anything that comes between you and God is an idol. And I've never really thought about that before until something that happened to me brought it to my attention that I had allowed something to come between me and God. And you can't do that. When you do that, then first of all, that's biblically incorrect.
Yeah.
But sometimes it gets masked, and we think it's part of a plan that God's leading us down a certain path. So you got to be careful with these things, But realize anything that's taking time away from God or taking you personally away from God. Don't depend on somebody else for and not just your salvation, but for your communication with God.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be between you and God.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to throw that in there.
I like when she says God wants to purify our whole heart so we can be prepared and mature for our calling.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about that, like they talk about the refiner, she's talking about how the refiners, turn up the heat so the impurities rise to the top. Well, if the impurities are down in here, they can't be gotten rid of, can they? And kind of that way with us. When God turns up the heat on something for us, the impurities tend to, like trials and tribulations, they tend to rise to the top. And if we are faithful to God, then that's an area that can be skimmed off. Mm-hmm. But if because again, to me, it's a matter of choice on our part, because we got to choose to try to be in line with God's will. Because if not, what trials and tribulations do to us is turn us bitter and turn us against God. Mm-hmm. But we've got to realize that this is an opportunity. Even though God may not be the cause of your trouble, He can use that as it comes to the top to get rid of it, to push it away so that you can be what He would have you to be. Trials are purifying if we hold tight to God. That's what I had wrote down right there. So, all right. Let's see. I'm on page 48. What do you got in that?
I like when she talks about I was determined that when God spoke to my heart, He would never again have to shout. I really like that because we've kind of talked about how sometimes we wish God would just yell and tell us what to do. Mm-hmm. But I think if we're really get ourselves tuned to Him, and we don't need that.
Yeah, and again, maybe that kind of boils back to the free choice. Mm-hmm. Because if I freely choose to listen to what you're saying to me, you don't need to holler, do you? Mm-hmm. You don't need to shout. Because if I really want to hear what you're saying, I'm going to be listening. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of that way with God. If God's got to shout at you, it's probably because you're not paying no attention. Yeah. So, again, back to our free will and our choice, isn't it? And, here's that, on 48, here's that thing I was talking about. God wanted to teach us that when we hold tightly to the things of the world, we not only lose the desire to give it away, but we lose the desire to receive. Mm-hmm. So with our open hands there, I love that on 48 there when she says, we're telling God that we recognize it is His and we offer it up freely to Him. And God may remove whatever He may not remove whatever we've offered Him, but He will continue to fill our open hands with blessings, amazing blessings, and not the cheap counterfeit blessings of the world. And sometimes we are all too quick to want the blessings of the world, ain't we? And we think, I'd rather have the blessings of the world. I don't know what God's going to give me. Yeah. But just because you don't know, it's kind of like, as long as you believe that it's going to be good, you should be excited for it, shouldn't you? So then that's when she talks a little bit about Abraham, isn't it? And about how Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac. And and God didn't really call him to do. He called him to do that, but He didn't allow him to follow through.
Yeah.
And but it changed the perspective, and it changed the relationship there, didn't it? The willingness to step out and to do something, and to give up something that you love. And hopefully, God doesn't call any of us to sacrifice a person. I don't think that Jesus took care of that for us, so we don't have to worry about that. But He may ask you to sacrifice something that you love. Maybe TV. He may ask you to sacrifice TV at some point, Cass. That's going to be rough, man. He may ask us to give up something that we really enjoy and love. But I promise you, if you give it up because God is leading you to give it up, He's going to replace it with something better.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to get through our hard heads and hearts, isn't it? Is that the blessings that are waiting for us are better than the blessings that we're giving up.
Yeah.
Even if those are blessings. So, okay. And then down on page 49, they talk about that. She talks about how once they got their sons, then the box, the realtor's box with the key, disappeared. And I like the way she said, interestingly enough, the week we brought our boys home, the box disappeared. Maybe the realtor finally came and got it, or maybe God removed it to get our attention. But isn't the timing interesting? And I read something that one of my Facebook friends put on there today about timing, about God's timing. And God's timing is always perfect. Our timing may be way off, but His timing is perfect. And I thought with this box disappearing, it was her confirmation too, that God was pleased with the fact they were willing to let go of it. They were willing. And then after the 82 dead fish incident, they repented of holding on and not being enthusiastic. So they got rid of their lukewarm attitude and took on the hot attitude, didn't they? Like, we're with you, God. We're with you. We're energetic. We're enthusiastic about this. And we'll do this. If this is what you want us to do. Yeah. And then God said, no, it's all right. I'll let you keep that house. Yeah. And I'll even bless you with some more kids to put in it. Yeah. So, and then she goes on to talk about, I love the part where she talks about the house driving her crazy, like the kid, because I had perfect identification with that, because when you and Kenzie were little, and I had worked at Winn-Dixie for 15 years. So if any of y'all know me from back in my Winn-Dixie days, I was there for 15 years. And the reason that I left there was because we got this new manager who wanted me to work on Sundays and wanted me to work every Sunday. I had to go in at 4 a.m. on Sunday morning and work till 12. And I kept saying, well, can I just come in like at midnight of Saturday night and work, and then I can get off, because I teach my girls Sunday school class. And they were like, no, they would not compromise with me. So me and Herb talked about it and decided I would quit. So I quit, left there, and took time, 3-4 years off with you and Kenzie when y'all were little. And I remember the first week that I was at home, I tried so hard, because I always thought, if I didn't have to work, boy, this house would be clean. I'll be keeping this house clean. Oh, it was. I worked real hard that first week keeping that house clean. Then here they'd come. Like 2 tornadoes through there. And even if I made them clean up, it was like I was constantly hollering, clean up this mess. Clean up this mess. Y'all have messed up this. I have worked so hard to clean this up, and now y'all messed it up. And I decided after about the first week, I remember, and I've said this many times, you've heard me say this, I decided after about the first week, I can have a clean house or I can have a happy house. I can't have both. And so I opted for happy and tried to accept the mess, not like not filth, but mess, and accept and enjoy that I had 2 little kids, and I wanted them to have a happy upbringing and not all that. I didn't want them to think, all my mama cares about is this house and things being orderly. And I don't think, and the fact that I don't think any of us have suffered too bad from it being messy, have we? And we had happy times during that time I was home with y'all. And that, I think that, and we spent time with Jade Bradley. She was my third daughter there for a while, and had a lot of fun during those times. And instead of cleaning the house, we'd get out and go on adventures, wouldn't we? And so, you know, I think that we have to sometimes realize, and I like the way she said that she thought it was selfish of her to call her home my house. Because if you're sharing your home with your family, it's our house. And God gave it to us. Why are we putting that house over a home? You know, because a home is where your heart is. It's where your loved ones are. It's where you're raising your family. And that should be a happy place. You don't want your kids to grow up and think, ooh, all I remember of my mama is that she didn't want nothing to be out of place. You know, I didn't want that. And you don't remember that at all, do you? I'm like, no, but Mama, you didn't teach me how to clean all that good. But she said, but my heart never wanted just a house. And I identified completely with that. Because my heart longs for a home full of people who I love. And so I like that. She talks about her son asking her to teach him to dance, and I thought that was really sweet. Yeah. I like that. All right, what do you got?
I like after talking about teaching her son to dance when she says, when those things like that come up, she says, I no longer see these things in my life as mere coincidence and brush them aside. I ponder these events and encounters and I pray over them. I pursue God and ask him what I'm supposed to learn through the experience. And I think, you know, sometimes God gives us those little moments and those things, and sometimes we just miss it.
We're not looking for them.
We just miss the blessing in it. And
and she says, look for answers. And, you know, she talks about how we need to look for God. We need to pursue God and ask him what I'm supposed to learn, like you just said. And then, you know, she talks about journaling too, which I think is a really good thing to do. She says, look for answers to the prayers you've already prayed and the understanding from the steps of obedience. So look at what you've asked for. You know, it's kind of like that song, count your many blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has. Yeah, because you start looking at the things you've prayed for that God has been faithful and given to you. Then you start looking at things you've asked for that God has not given to you, and you realize sometimes those are blessings too. Because sometimes, you know, Garth Brooks said that, you know, sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers, you know. So look at things that God has done for you, whether it's answering in a different way or saying no.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's answered and the answer is no.
And the answer is no. That's right. Yeah. And then on the bottom of 51 there, it's talking about the secret place. What did you think about that section?
Yeah, I liked that. I really like the remain in me. And she talks a lot about that. And remaining in him. And, you know, finding that place where she can just be with him.
Yeah, she said the biblical name of that is the remaining place. But she called it the secret place. And if you're following our daily devotions, this was one of the devotions last week, I think. It was one of these directly from her. It was word for word this. Yeah. So as we go along, sometimes the devotion book is going to be a little ahead of what we've done, and sometimes it may be a little behind what we've done. So, but it's cool that sometimes it gets confirmed. So if you're going, you know what? Yeah, it may get repeated. Yeah. But I think that's a good thing because sometimes, you know, repetition helps us to learn. So, yeah. But she talks about the Peter Frampton song.